Tonight, tornado tragedy. Prayer and devastation after some 36 tornadoes tear through 6 states. Scores of people are dead as search and rescue crews tear through the rubble.
I am praying that maybe original estimates of those we've lost were wrong. If so, it's going to be pretty wonderful.
Plus, the latest on mask mandates and vaccine requirements as COVID cases increase across the country. And the former White House Chief of Staff faces a contempt of Congress vote. On the firing line in the investigation into the January 6th riots.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Americans rallying to the heartland, picking up the pieces in the midst of destruction beyond imagination. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
Good evening. I'm Jenna Browder. At least 85 people dead and dozens still missing after violent tornadoes ripped through the South and the Midwest this weekend. Tonight, rescue teams are racing against the clock to find any signs of life trapped underneath the rubble. CBN's Brody Carter has more on the devastation and cleanup that is already underway. Brody.
John, Jenna, early estimates are still being tallied, and it may be weeks before we have a definitive death toll. We do know this weekend's tornado outbreak is one of the worst on record for the month of December. Friday night into Saturday morning, a fury of tornadoes broke across 8 states. Among the many feared dead are reports the youngest victim being just 5 months old. More than 100 others are still unaccounted for.
It looks like a war. I mean, like it just looks like bombs went off.
The National Weather Service received reports of more than 3 dozen tornadoes tearing through a 250-mile path from Mississippi to Illinois. One supercell tornado stayed on the ground for 227 straight miles, possibly the longest in U.S. history.
And the people who lost everything but are still here with us, it's hard to think of them as lucky, but this is really hard.
In Kentucky alone, the governor's latest report is at least 64 people are dead, a lower number than he had first feared. More than 1,000 homes damaged or destroyed across 10 counties. Before and after photos show the devastation at Mayfield Consumer Products, a candle factory where initial reports estimated as many as 70 workers might be dead. But as of Monday, that number stands at 8 dead, 8 missing. In Illinois, 6 people died at an Amazon distribution warehouse near Edwardsville.
People who've lost their homes. It's so close to Christmas. We have so many people at the candle factory still missing. It is insane what Mother Nature did in just a span of minutes.
It is unusual. It is unusual how it happened, how many places it touched down, and the length of the path.
President Biden has approved disaster declarations for both Kentucky and Illinois. He plans to travel to Kentucky's hardest hit areas on Wednesday. Now FEMA, the National Guard, and volunteers across the nation pouring in with help to clean up and rescue. John, Jenna, back to you.
CBN's Brody Carter. Thank you so much, Brody. Here with us now is Toby Swagger. He's with CBN's Operation Blessing, which is already on the ground helping the victims of the disaster there in Kentucky. Toby, thank you so much for making time to talk with us. We know you're extremely busy. You are in Bowling Green, Kentucky. 3 dozen tornadoes tearing through a half dozen states this weekend. Toby, how unprecedented is this, and does what you're seeing compare with what you've seen in relief past efforts?
It's overwhelming. There's devastation from neighborhood to neighborhood. It's comparable to different storms, but every storm's different. There have been communities affected, like you said, in all of these states, from Tennessee to Missouri and here in Kentucky, where I'm at right now in Bowling Green.
Yeah. We know Operation Blessing has a hunger strike task force reserved for situations like this, and we understand it's already delivering disaster relief to the hard-hit town of Mayfield, Kentucky. Tell us about that work, Toby.
Yeah, there are relief loads that are coming in to Mayfield here in Bowling Green with different church partners that are on the ground. They bring those loads in, and it has immediate needs items, especially here in the first 2 to 3 days after the storm hits. There are those immediate things: food, warmth, sometimes tarps, things of that nature. And those things will be coming to these different distribution points through Hunger Strike Force to our Operation Blessing U.S. disaster relief partners to make a difference in the communities that are hardest hit.
Toby, we know in addition to church partners, you also have corporate partners as well. Operation Blessing has a disaster relief team sending Home Depot disaster relief kits. Can you talk to us about what's in those kits?
Those buckets often have cleaning supplies or whatever the immediate situation is. We have buckets that are specific to different kinds of incidents. So a flood bucket may have something different than a tornado bucket, but each of them have basic needs items like tarps from time to time, or they'll have cleaning supplies. Sometimes there's masks. Sometimes there's flashlights. It's whatever might be most beneficial for that community, for the people that are affected in that time.
Yeah, we are looking at least 85 deaths, and that number could climb as so many people, Toby, are still missing. You know, in the days and weeks ahead, as you're there on the ground, what worries you most moving forward?
That people will forget that as we get busy with our lives, as we get busy with the holidays that are coming up, that the people have been affected here in this community and in some of the smaller communities that aren't getting as much media coverage, that those people will begin to feel like they're disenfranchised, which is why it's so great when the church and organizations like Operation Blessing, the U.S. disaster relief, especially when we can go into those communities and make a difference by simply being Jesus with skin on, listening to someone's situation, taking time to pray with them and giving them a flood bucket or something along those lines to try and meet an immediate need so that they can have a little bit of their hope restored.
I've been on the ground and seen personally the work that Operation Blessing does and the help that it provides. You cannot put a price tag on all of that. Toby, real quickly, can you describe how Operation Blessing is planning to attack the situation with disaster relief? We know first there's search and rescue, but then you also do cleaning and gutting out. Tell us about the process here.
We're currently in the assessing phase. Right now, I am here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm going to head to Mayfield and some of those in-between communities. Tomorrow, I was in Hendersonville, Tennessee this weekend, looking at the different impact zones and figuring out how we could best serve those communities. And at this point, we are in that assessing phase and figuring out what resources our partners on the ground might need. And then as they have additional needs that they could request from us, we'll move forward at that time so that we can make the biggest impact that we can for the community.
Yeah. Well, Toby, we thank you for being there, and our hearts and our prayers go out to everybody there who's been affected by these terrible storms. Unprecedented when you see some of the footage, especially from the drones. So, Toby, thank you so much. And again, if you'd like to help Operation Blessing and the people hardest hit by these tornadoes, please visit ob.org. Toby Swagger with Operation Blessing, thank you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, a sobering reminder tonight of the toll paid by Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, the U.S. setting a grim milestone with some 800,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths. The latest tally coming as cases rise across the country by 10% or more in the week since Thanksgiving. A new CDC forecast predicts about 40,000 more Americans could die from COVID-19 before the end of the year if daily death rates remain stable.
And to combat rising cases in New York, today the governor is reinstituting a statewide mask mandate, meaning people at indoor public places who do not show proof of vaccination will now be required to wear face coverings.
This is a crisis of the unvaccinated. Those are the individuals that are 10 times more likely to be in our hospitals. And this is where I get angry. They cannot sustain this any longer.
And that was Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. Coming up, you know these faces, David Brody and Nathan Gonzalez. Join us for our Faith Nation political panel. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. In a last-ditch attempt to avoid contempt of Congress charges against former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, his attorney called tonight's January 6th Select Committee vote, quote, contrary to law and a violation of the separation of powers. The vote, in response to Meadows' decision to stop cooperating with the committee, and comes on the heels of documents from the former White House Chief of Staff, first reported by Politico, revealing the National Guard was on standby to protect, quote, Trump people in the lead up to the Capitol attack. Before his about face, Meadows had turned over thousands of pages of records with no claim of executive privilege.
And joining us now for our Faith Nation political panel, Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, and CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. Both welcome. Happy Monday. So the January 6th commission is voting tonight on Mark Meadows. David, this first question to you. We know he did cooperate to a point, contributing some 9,000 pages of documents to the committee investigating the Capitol attacks. Is it enough to hold him in contempt of Congress, or is he protected by executive privilege, unlike Steve Bannon, who was not a White House employee at the time?
Yeah,
I think we're having trouble
Jenna,
with.
I think that's one of the key questions, and ever since Congress held Steve Bannon in contempt, I think that probably sent a message to other people who the committee is going to bring forward. Meadows has kind of been all over the place. I mean, he cooperated, and then now he's choosing not to cooperate. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know where that leaves him. But I have a feeling if the committee wants to talk to him more and he is unwilling to cooperate more, I think he does risk some legal action on his part.
All right, I think it looks like we have David back. We were having some trouble with his mic. David, can you hear us?
I do hear you.
Do you want to chime in there?
Sure. What I was basically saying is that, obviously it's going to be up to the courts to determine whether or not executive privilege will work in this case. Meadows has a stronger case than Steve Bannon, for sure, because he was in the White House. And let's also remember, Mark Meadows, and I couldn't hear everything what Nathan was saying, so I hope I don't repeat, but I will say this, that Mark Meadows did contribute, 9,000 or so documents. So it's not like he's not being uncooperative, but of course we know the key documents they want, which is the rubber in the road here.
Well, the rest of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda is still at a stalemate. The Congressional Budget Office released its score. Instead of $1.7 trillion Democrats were projecting, the CBO came in at nearly $5 trillion over a 10-year period, and that does not account for expiring items. Today, President Biden spoke with moderate Democrat Joe Manchin, to try to move this forward. Nathan, do you think Democrats are going to be able to see this through, and if so, when?
Well, the more that the cost goes up, I think the more unlikely it is that Manchin gets on board. He's been very upfront that the cost is one of the key concerns that he has. And if President Biden, who served decades in the Senate and knows what it's like to be a senator, can't convince another, a senator at this point, I think it gets to be bleak. I mean, I'm not saying that it's definitely not going to pass, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Democrats pull the plug and just try to do piecemeal a few of the things that they know they can have Manchin and Sinema on board.
Yeah, Politico reporting this afternoon that Manchin was no closer to yes and was dubious of this latest CBO score. David, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will stay on to helm the Democrats in the House through the midterms and maybe even beyond. This is according to CNN. The Speaker is set to turn 82 this year with 20 years as Democrats' leader under her belt. Did anyone really think she was on her way out?
Yes. I did, and I still think she's on her way out. Let's remember that Nancy Pelosi has said that she was looking to have this be her last term, right, until the midterms. Okay, well, guess what? Here come the midterms. Here comes a potential Republican tsunami, and Democrats could be wiped out big time with 70-plus seats they lose in the House, potentially. Nathan can better speak to that. But you're going to tell me that in November or December of 2022, after Democrats get a shellacking in the House, that Nancy Pelosi is going to continue on as Speaker of the House? Yeah, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you as well. I don't buy it.
Nathan, to that, I think the CNN article that I read was also talking about the strategy here with people who are familiar with her thinking was that she would stay on through the midterms just to kind of be a symbolic gesture to not show that she's tapping out. And also her prolific fundraising, raising over $1 billion over the course of her time as leader. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, David's right that just because she's running for re-election doesn't mean she's committing to serving another full term or another full 2 years. I would be surprised if she sticks around, particularly in the face of more likely losses by the Democratic Party. And it's not, we know Republicans don't like her, but there are Democrats who have stayed on board with her, but they have stayed on board knowing that, looking at the signal that she's on her way out, because there's a real appetite for younger or newer leadership on the Democratic side, and that pressure will be tremendous if Democrats take on the losses that it looks like they'll have right now.
Yeah, David, just a few seconds left, but on Sunday, Chris Wallace, a longtime Sunday show host at Fox News, said he was going over to CNN. Quick comment on that.
Well, look, I don't see this as an ideological situation, whether it be a left-wing or a right-wing thing. I think this is more institutional. I see he's a little bit more of that, what they call the latte-sipping D.C. establishment elitist crowd, and I think that's what a lot of conservatives don't like. They also think he's left-wing, but forget that for a second. I just think that he kind of personified the elitist crowd, and that's why he was starting to become persona non grata at Fox News.
Well, we are out of time. We'll have to leave it there. David, Nathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you both.
Up next, celebrating human rights and how to hold the world's top human rights abusers accountable. Welcome back. Well, Human Rights Day is a worldwide celebration remembering the adoption of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights more than 70 years ago. People across the globe are beset by human rights violations, from the abuse against the people of Afghanistan brought by the Taliban to the documented atrocities against the Uyghur people in China, and the ongoing violence, killing, and displacement of religious minorities, especially Christians in Nigeria.
Well, recently, Jenna and I spoke with former Ambassador-at-Large for Religious Freedom, Sam BROWNBACK, about the condition of human rights across the globe. Take a look.
Well, Ambassador, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. What do you consider to be the most pressing human rights issue in the world right now?
Oh, boy, there's a long list of them, unfortunately. But I really think, and maybe it's just I know this field the best, but I think the persecution of people of faith is the most pressing issue, and here's why. If we don't get this one right, you're going to see continued increasing of people being killed and slaughtered and persecuted for their faith of huge numbers. Huge numbers. You're going to see the clash of civilizations taking place because civilizations are built on a religion. If we get it right and start moving towards protecting everybody's religious freedom, you're going to see the Human Rights Project flourish and grow around the world, and the other areas flourish and grow of human rights. That's why I just think it's just probably the most pressing issue right now.
Ambassador, along the lines of people of faith, we're also looking at religious and cultural minorities. The word genocide has been used to describe China's documented human rights abuses of the Uyghurs. And now the United States is imposing a full diplomatic boycott of next year's Winter Olympics in Beijing. Other nations, Canada and the UK, following suit. Is this an unprecedented move or a slap on the wrist?
Well, I wouldn't call it an unprecedented move. We've done diplomatic boycotts before, but I think it's an important move, and I hope it causes people to move forward with other efforts to really address this Olympics. Like this week, a group of us called for an advertisers boycott of the Olympic. These major Western companies should be boycotting these Olympics and pulling their money back from advertising if the Chinese government won't announce a date that they're going to close these concentration camps. They've got to close these things down, and we can't be sending them money and advertising how great China is at the same time they're conducting a genocide.
Yeah. The Taliban have ruled Afghanistan since the chaotic withdrawal of the U.S. troops back in August. In those few short months, Ambassador, the government has racked up atrocities against human rights, from executions to disappearances. What can be done now to help the people of Afghanistan?
We can help them get out and get into the United States or Brazil, Mexico, other countries that'll take them on a permanent basis. We really got to get people out. I'm working with a group of NGOs and actors to get people out of Afghanistan and get them to safe third countries. We need to take more of them in the United States. And we need to be really pressing the Taliban to take care of their own people and see that they get fed. The big issue now that's facing a lot of them is just pure starvation and healthcare concerns that they can't get access to medicines. This is a desperate situation, and we bear a lot of responsibility for it. I thought it was terrible we pulled out the way we did without getting the people out, that it helped us so much for so long. I think we should have stayed, and we may well end up going back into Afghanistan. But right now, we've got to help these people that are in dire straits and in harm's way in Afghanistan.
Ambassador, we only have about half a minute left. The State Department recently removed Nigeria from its list of countries of particular concern over threats to religious freedom. That move surprised many. In the few seconds we have left, why the change?
Bureaucracy won. They've never wanted to look at the issue in Nigeria as having any connection to religion. But it is where you've got these Islamic fundamentalist terrorist groups moving in and persecuting fellow Muslims and Christians as well.
All right, and Ambassador Sam Brownback, thank you as always.
Thank you. God bless you all, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Coming up, beauty in the middle of devastation and the power of faith and music bringing healing in the midst of pain.
Finally tonight, sweet sorrow as America's heartland is reeling from those devastating tornadoes. One Kentucky man finding beauty, though, in the destruction.
While Jordan Bays' family rummaged their ravaged home, they suddenly heard the melodious sound of a grand piano. With the house in tatters all around him and missing keys on the water-damaged piano, Jordan played through the storm to the tune of a worship song, an old worship song called "There's Something About That Name," written by Bill and Gloria Gaither, a reminder to give God glory even in the toughest circumstances. Beautiful.
Yeah, gosh, and our hearts just go out to those people devastated by this storm.
Thank you for watching Faith Nation.
Have a great night.